break the loop? You gotta be kidding me. Nope, that's there. I'm seeing it. Ah, man.
Everyone is talking about Deathloop. Or let me rephrase that. Everyone was talking about Deathloop when the game came out, and it still made sense to make videos about it. But I am slow, and I took the time to explore the game before drawing my conclusions. It's not always easy to follow your own taste and subjective point of view when even IGN, whose rating system has become almost a meme, gave Deathloop a 10 out of 10. And yes, you read the title. Arkane Studios' latest work is not a 10 out of 10 at all. On the contrary, it has elements that can be considered outstanding and others that are just average.
Oh boy, time flies. Well, at least it used to. Happy first day, everybody.
Deathloop puts us in the shoes of Colt Vaughn, who wakes up on the cryptic island of Black Reef. The protagonist seems to be stuck in a loop where the same day starts over and over again. Colt wants to break the loop, and he soon finds out that the only way to do so is to kill 8 powerful visionaries in just one day. But the powerful Juliana is on the hunt to stop Colt in any way possible. So, in order to make a final plan to take down all 8 visionaries and break the loop, pick a part of the day, choose one of 4 maps, collect documents, discover new hints, take down enemies or completely avoid them, and run to the exit. In the meantime, survive if Juliana decides to invade your game. The archenemy can be controlled both by AI or an actual player, but be careful when you choose because the first tries will be very rough if you decide to go against real players. I'll get more into character development and the impact of the story in the final part of this video, because I need to discuss everything else first to make my final point.
I need art juice! I need paint! Please!
Once you get past that initial tutorial and that warm-colored beach, Deathloop blasts you with one of the most original art styles of the last few years. And I wasn't expecting anything less from Arkane. While Dishonored paints a dark world where London of the 19th century meets technological evolution, Deathloop is a true explosion of the 60s, with an even more colorful spin on it. At the same time, it pays homage to the Victorian franchise that made the studio so popular by adding houses that recall the fictional streets of Dunwall. Architecture is heavily inspired by great pieces of design. In a fascinating article published by Wired, the art team explains the inspirational process behind Juliana's home, which is one of the first architectures we see. The hideout is a modernist mansion that clings to one of the island's many rugged cliffsides. One section of the building juts out over the ocean, held up by 4 huge columns reminiscent of those found within the Johnson Wax headquarters building in Racine, Wisconsin, designed by the architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Deathloop is filled with these kinds of architectural allusions. As for the interiors, the references are even stronger. Going back to the same Wired article, Sébastien Mitton, our director and co-creative director, mentions the precious lair, radical homes and hideouts of movie villains as the main source of inspiration for the spaces between 4 walls. It is always a pleasure to find a grey, anonymous-looking building with a sign on the outside just to realize that there is an explosion of art on the inside. Every building is like a ride in an amusement park with unique furniture and color palettes, atmospheric music, and a great attention to details like objects, textures, and quiet pieces of lore. Casual enemies are another interesting element of the art style, with their almost abstract appearance, which underlines, on the other side, the unique faces of the visionaries. To wrap up the 60s in all their glory, posters and cutscenes are also heavily impacted by the works of Saul Bass and Robert McGuinness, recognizable for many James Bond movie posters. But what about the background? Well, this is where it gets a little bit rusty. There isn't much to look for outside of the hypnotizing maps, just endless static backgrounds which mostly fail to feel real. If this is done on purpose as a consequence of Black Reef being stuck in time, then great. If it's just a lack of development, not equally great. The art style of a game can be perfect, but it also needs to go through a game engine, and Deathloop mostly manages to do so. I say mostly because while textures, ray tracing, colors and models are all great, can we please talk about how good this hamburger looks? 10 out of 10 food design. The same can't be said for performance on PC. This statement will probably age poorly because the team is already working on fixing this issue, which is completely absent on PS5. Deathloop can't be easily categorized into old gen or next gen. On one side, it is a PS5 and PC exclusive with ray tracing features that would melt a PS4. On the other, it doesn't have the loading times that I got used to at this point by playing Demon's Souls or Returnal or Rift Apart. But what really matters is that graphic and art style work greatly together. Deathloop doesn't want or doesn't need to be realistic. Just look at the faceless enemies that I previously mentioned or the exaggerated bloodstains. It is just perfectly immersive. Speaking about immersion, let's talk about what I think made so many people fall in love with Deathloop, me included.
Ramblin' Frank likes to play with fireworks. Bet you I can see to it that he gets burned.
Cold starts with no weapons on the previously mentioned beach, and after a short tutorial where you get to learn stealth kills, how to target enemies to learn more about their arsenal and level of awareness, you start exploring the loop day after day, and the instruments at your disposal are more and more powerful and versatile. Before entering each of the 4 phases of the day, you're given the chance to change your loadout. Unlike Dishonored, which almost never relies on shooting guns and being so aggressive, Deathloop does want you to stealth bust enemies, but also wants you to be ready to wreak havoc whenever you're caught sneaking. So it is only appropriate that there's a variety of weapons which get better and better in time. Becoming a god in this game is a fast process, so no unnecessary and frustrating grinding is required. Weapons have different types of quality, like many titles similar to Deathloop, so the higher the quality, the better the special ability. Also, they can be upgraded with weapon trinkets, found on enemies' bodies and secret locations. Another thing that makes a big difference between Dishonored and Deathloop is resources. No, you don't need to spare your ammo, you don't need to count your health potions, because it's just not that type of game. Health can be restored with countless fizz pop cans and health stations scattered around the map, just like ammo is provided both by enemies and vending machines. What you do need to be careful about is infusing your loot. The process of infusion makes your weapons and slabs not just temporary in one specific loop. It requires residuum, which is a sort of energy contained in visitors or objects from another spatial temporal dimension. You can infuse weapons, trinkets and slabs every time you return to the exit without being killed, and with enough residuum, which can also be obtained by sacrificing trinkets or weapons that you don't need. If you die, you lose everything. It sounds tragic, but it is a fundamental aspect of the roguelike element of Deathloop, which is secondary but still part of the structure of the game. Fortunately, one of the first powers you unlock is Reprise, which gives you 3 chances to die before actually losing all your not infused stuff. What you never lose regardless of living or dying is discoveries, which are pieces of information related to the storyline or specific quests. Also arsenal leads, which are related to special weapons and powers, and the visionary leads, which are the main sequences of actions required to finally make a plan and take down the 8 visionaries in just one loop. But let's get to the actual tools. I won't dive too deep into the weapons because the best ones are related to specific quests, and I would ruin half the fun. Everything you need to know is that yes, There's dual wielding, so enough said. What I want to consider more into detail is slabs, which is the name given to powers in the universe of Deathloop. First of all, there isn't the same variety as in Dishonored. We have Carnesis, which throws enemies into the air, Nexus, which links more than one target together so that what happens to one happens to everyone linked, Shift, which allows fast teleportation in a certain radius, Ether, which makes Cold invisible, and Havoc, which increases inflicted damage and decreases taken damage for a short period of time. These few powers, with their relative upgrades obtained by infusing the same slab over and over again, make Deathloop extremely fun and diverse, and they encourage the player to take down enemies or avoid them in completely different ways. The same versatile approach is applied to another big feature of the game, hacking. Right at the beginning of the tutorial, Colt acquires the Hackamagique, which is a very odd way to call a radio able to cause disturbance, open locked doors, shut down cameras and turrets, or turn them against their owners. This feature gets very old very quickly because it is limited to exactly what I just listed. But it adds a layer to the intriguing stealth approach. And if someone asks me to describe Deathloop in one word, layer would exactly be my primary choice.
I wonder so that my wanderings wander. I'm wondering right now what we wanderers will leave washing around in our wake, picking up what I'm putting down.
Arkane's unique level design strikes once again in a completely new way. Since every map changes during the loop, undiscovered areas are unlocked only during a certain time of the day. 4 maps suddenly become almost 16. Repeating the same mission is a great incentive to find new routes, and there are many routes to reach the same objective. Verticality and horizontality are blended together, giving the player the chance to explore a street from the surrounding roofs or through the narrow interiors of a house. Spaces, proportions, and distances are studied to implement the shift slab and the double jump trinket most of the times, which makes the exploration fast-paced and rhythmic almost. The only thing that interrupts this seamless dance is Windows. Yes, the cursed Windows strike again. The main quest, set in, let's say, the more official buildings of each map, is surrounded by collateral activities, mysteries to uncover, codes to decipher, challenges to complete. The absence of a minimap underlines how good the level design is, because there's no wasted space and every corner has its own meaning, which makes it immediately recognizable. I have to say that the multilateral approach and the completion of each quest is often too guided. With markers showing where the next target is, it can also easily turn into blindly interacting with a paper or an audio recording without even analyzing its content and just go to the next marker. Luckily, there's always HUD settings, and I feel like turning off markers really makes Deathloop a whole different game, where memory and deduction count even more. And between one target and the next, we get to the real action. Deathloop is clearly made for stealth, but unlike Dishonored, it gives the player the chance to get something off their chest by jumping in front of an enemy and waiting for countless rounds of backup to take down. Sometimes this can become the only solution when backstabs stop working because of some weird bug, which in my opinion could be related to crouching. But I'm no expert and it will probably be fixed like everything else. The AI isn't as bad as I thought it would be from the previews, but it doesn't offer an innovative experience. Enemies react to grenades, they start looking for you if you shoot or make too much noise, they ask for help when they see you, they actually aim and try to take you down, both with guns and knives, but that's pretty much it. The 8 visionaries feel like the same experience over and over again, as if they're random enemies, just with a bigger health bar. If the alarm goes off, enemies spawn in way too close to Colt, and this breaks the illusion of backup approaching and turns everything into chaos. And be ready to shoot or run for your life, because they will take you down if you don't react immediately. Good thing there's the reprise slap, which makes things more balanced, otherwise the experience would be extremely painful and nerve-wracking. Not saying it's difficult, but sometimes enemies just start shooting like crazy and it just wouldn't make sense to let you die like that without giving you a second chance. The 3 chances you're given during each level are especially precious when it comes to fighting against Juliana, Colt's #1 enemy.
Oh, shit! What?
Oh, you always fall for the same old shit. Just once, please. Can you try your hardest to make this interesting?
Whoa. What the fuck is this?
Carnices! Ooh, you're gonna give me that attitude? You know, I usually make it easy for you, you ungrateful prick. But this time I'll let you see yourself out.
Yup, we did it.
The addition of a PvP element to a game which is so focused on the single player experience makes Deathloop really special. As I already said, Juliana can be controlled both by AI or by another player. In the first case, it's extremely easy and it only adds some flavor to each level by forcing you to find her before she finds you or hack the radio that allows you to unlock the exit. But when you activate the all-night mode, be ready for a whole different experience. In the beginning, it was completely overwhelming. I have to admit, I didn't even see Juliana most of the times before dying. But then, once you try and try again, you start mastering the art of fighting the opponent. The encounters are completely unexpected. Both you and the enemy can play with mines, weapons, slabs, and verticality to take out one another. The duel can be fast-paced and short, or it can turn into a long hide-and-seek game, in particular when Colt is doing a quest on the opposite side of the map, while Juliana is waiting close to the radio. It is one of the features underlined in the marketing for Deathloop, but without it, I would enjoy the game just the same, if not even more. Except for the few times I actually managed to defeat a player and my endorphins went through the roof.
This is Deathloop. At the beginning of the end again.
Deathloop has a rich and many-sided soundtrack which fits perfectly together with the general art style of the game. It is given to the player in different forms. What I mean by that is that each level has its own melody and set of instruments which will change if you're discovered by enemies, but at the same time, there's so much more. Specific spaces, for example, an extravagant house, can have speakers and play their own melody. Music is both external and internal, artificial and implemented into the level design. Unlike a strongly story-driven game where a melody is associated to a moment, Deathloop associates music to a space, and this makes the immersion even more convincing. The style mixes the tones of a James Bond movie with sci-fi influences, while also referencing the raw sounds of the 60s and 70s. The final result is rich, dynamic, catchy, and energetic. For some reason, it reminds me a lot of Magneto in X-Men First Class, but maybe it's just me. So that's it. Wait, something is missing, right? Well, it is for me at least. I'm talking about the plot and character development. As I said in the beginning, I'm keeping this for last, because everything I described up until this point is very good. In some cases, even perfect. So it would only make sense to keep the weakest aspect for last. On one hand, there's different exchanges through the radio between Julian and Colt at the beginning of each level, and these exchanges are a true consequence of the choices made in the previous levels, not just fillers. For example, Juliana will mention a certain visionary if the latter was taken down in the previous part of the day. The writing is great in this case, and both Jason Kelly and Ozioma Akaga's performances are brilliant. But other than that, there is no real climax nor the urge to complete the story because it is only a thin string connecting each action rather than a predominant aspect of Deathloop. One thing worth mentioning is the interaction between Colt and the player, which I found very original. Throughout the game, the main character can see text invisible to everyone else, and this makes me wonder if Colt is interacting with previous versions of himself, or those texts are our own interaction with the world of Deathloop. It is brilliant because not knowing which one is the right answer breaks the fourth wall in a whole new way. The visionaries are extremely intriguing, and the more we progress through the game, the more we get to know who these characters are, where they are, what they're doing, but there is never a true confrontation between Colt and each one of them. Yes, Fia might be a crazy artist who's ready to sacrifice anything to get what she wants, or Frank is indeed an egomaniac obsessed with fireworks, but except for a few explanatory animated sequences, which are still really enjoyable, and pieces of lore obtained by listening to recordings or examining documents, the full picture always remains blurry. Not in terms of story, but in terms of personality. Taking down a visionary feels just like the previous one, and there's never a dialogue between Colt and the enemies, just short sentences activated during fighting sequences. And that's why the ending felt empty and almost weak, just an excuse to put an end to the story. This video will be longer than usual, so it's just right that I wrap things up. To recap, Deathloop is a great video game because it offers a unique approach to level design, an unprecedented art style which keeps delivering surprises, a gameplay which rarely gets boring thanks to the variety of weapons and slab upgrades, an interesting PvP component, and a remarkable soundtrack. What lacks is a compelling story and a climactic structure which could have given the game a better pace. The AI is just acceptable, and the visionaries' stories are only told through text and announcements on loudspeakers scattered around the maps. Juliana is a great counterpart, but the relationship between her and Colt seems almost rushed and trimmed, never truly engaging, regardless of the great performances. So, these are my thoughts. The title is just kind of provocative because I do think the game is really good, and if you somehow made it to the end of this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did you play Deathloop? If yes, was it on PC or PS5? Please let me know in the comments below because I'm tired of talking only to myself. Thank you. I am 2D. Thanks for listening and see you next time.